Hey guys, how's it going? I'm here to announce my TBR for a readathon and to encourage you to participate in the readathon if you haven't already considered it. This readathon is called Maybe Midrash, and it is hosted by Jason over at Old Blues Chapter and Verse, Felicia over at the Little Prairie Library, and Steve Donahue. And don't be too confused by the title if you don't know what Midrash means. This readathon is actually very simple, but if you want a definition of what Midrash means, then I recommend you go and watch the announcement videos of the hosts, because they all kind of define it. Jason in particular gives a very detailed definition of what it is, so I would in particular recommend his announcement video, but of course watch them all. So as I said, the readathon is very, very simple. What you have to do to participate is just read 2 books that deal seriously with the subject of religion. 1 work of fiction and 1 work of nonfiction. The purpose of this is not to convert anyone or to preach to anyone or to kowtow to any particular faith or denomination, as I think is pretty clearly indicated by the fact that the hosts don't specify one particular faith that the subject of the books has to be, and by the fact that one of the hosts is an atheist and completely non-religious, and by, I think, the general disposition of the other two, because neither of them they're both deeply religious, but not, they're not preachy, I don't think, or, interested in proselytizing, certainly. I think that the major motivation behind this read-along is just to get people to engage with religion themselves, and to help people to realize that just because a work of literature engages with religion doesn't mean that it won't teach you something, even if you're non-religious or if you're an atheist like myself. In fact, I will say, this doesn't have much to do with the readathon, but I will say that one reason that I personally am very interested in religion, I think I've been pretty open about my interest in religion. I read a lot of books on the subject. Obviously, it was pretty easy for me to find books for this readathon because it's a subject that I'm interested in. And one of the major reasons that I think I'm interested in religion, aside from the fact that I think that religion is just kind of inherently fascinating, I don't think you need any sort of high-minded philosophical reason to be into it. I think it makes for fascinating reading as a subject of scholarship. I think it gives great insights into the way people think and the way people engage with the world and with each other and such, and I think that it's just inherently fascinating in that way. But another reason that I have always found religion really interesting, despite, again, being non-religious, is that I think at its heart, religion is a set of metaphors for finding meaning in the universe. So all these, weird things that religion say, like that a man was resurrected after 3 days after he died, or that a man climbed a ladder up to heaven, or that there's this supernatural deity somewhere who's, giving us these commandments or something. These are all sort of metaphors for finding meaning in the universe and finding meaning in our lives. And I think that can be incredibly compelling, whether you're an atheist or whether you're religious. I don't think you need to believe in any of these things, that any of these things actually happened, to be moved by them and to think about them and to find a lot of value in them in that way. So that's kind of why I'm a big fan of this readathon, and why I'm going to put forth some of the books that I'm going to be reading for it. I'm going to talk about a bunch of books, but only 3 are going to be guaranteed reads, books that I will read for Maybe Midrash. Then I'm going to have a bunch of others that I'm not going to guarantee that I'll read, but I will leave aside as maybes, so to speak. So I will just get right into what those 3 books I am going to read are. I had to think a lot about them because, again, I have a lot of books on this subject. I have the books I'm going to talk about here, both the 3 that I'm going to guaranteed read and the maybes. But then I also have this whole other pile that I gathered of other books on religion on my shelf, and there are even more besides these. But anyway, these are the 3 that I'm going to read. The first one is Death Comes for the Archbishop by Willa Cather. And this is about Father Jean-Marie Latour, who is a Catholic priest who's trying in his own gentle sort of way to spread Catholicism in New Mexico in the 19th century. And this novel is basically the story of his life as he tries to, proselytize in New Mexico among these sort of lawless people who live there, who are white and also predominantly Mexican and Native American, and as he deals with his own faith and his own loneliness in this sort of vast, empty landscape. Well, not empty, but seemingly empty landscape. And I read The Song of the Lark by Willa Cather earlier in the year, and I really, really liked it, so I'm looking forward to reading more Willa Cather. The next two books are both nonfiction, as is my wont. So the first of those two is by one of my favorite authors. This is A History of God, The 4,000-Year Quest of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam by Karen Armstrong. This book covers basically the story of how these three Abrahamic religions have conceived of God, how different thinkers, different men and women have thought about God. What is God? What does God do for us? What do we do with God? What is this weird, sort of vague idea of God? My favorite characterization of this book is that it's an intellectual history of monotheism. And I wanted to read it for a long time because I think it sounds fascinating. And because Karen Armstrong is one of my favorite writers, and this book appears to be, from what I can gather, it appears to be taking its place as her kind of magnum opus, and the fact that I haven't read it is terrible, given that I love this author. So yeah, anyway, that's the first nonfiction book. The second one is another very famous one. This one is actually a Pulitzer Prize winner. I don't think it needs that much of an introduction, but it's God, a Biography by Jack Miles. And this is, you could call it a real biography, but really I think it's more of a work of biblical exegesis, or maybe even a work of theology, where Jack Miles reads the Old Testament, the Christian Old Testament, as a biography of a person named God. And he just reads the Old Testament that way, as though that's what it were. And that's really all I needed to sell me on this book. I wanted to read it ever since I heard about it, and it's been on my TBR for a few years, and this seems like the perfect time to just get it under my belt, finally. I have two other books by Jack Miles on my shelf as well, which I'm not going to talk about, but that I may read later in this year. Maybe not for Maybe Midrash, but anyway, I will get now to the books that are my maybes. I'm going to talk a lot less about these, just because they're maybes, they're not guarantees. But if you have any comments on any of them, I would love to hear. But the first one is Why I'm Not a Christian and Other Essays on Religion and Related Subjects by Bertrand Russell, which the title kind of tells you what it's about. And something I was interested in with this readathon was also including sort of criticisms of religion, thoughtful criticisms of religion, not the sort of new atheist style shoot from the hip condemnation of institutionalized religion, as well as every single religion person on the planet. What I'm more interested in is really thoughtful criticisms that, know religious history, know what religion is, which most new atheists don't, and criticize it and find the flaws in it and what's wrong with it. And this is sort of a collection of essays on that subject. Next is another collection of essays. This is The Givenness of Things by Marilynne Robinson. And she covers all of her typical subjects in this volume, Calvinism, America, religion, the new atheists, and so on and so forth. It also contains an interview between Marilynne Robinson and Barack Obama at the very end. I love Marilynne Robinson's writings, whatever she's writing about. Next one is another novel. I think I may have misled you and said that all of these books are nonfiction, but there is one novel, but it's The Last Temptation of Christ by Nikos Kazantzakis, where he kind of tells the story of Jesus Christ as though he were a real man, just a real human being, and made the choice on his own to, go through what he went through, to sacrifice himself for humanity's sins. And I think it sounds really, really good. I know I know the film version Jason from Chapter and Verse really likes. I'm not sure if Jason has read the novel, but I know that Neil Griffiths, a booktuber who doesn't really make videos anymore, but who I always really respected, loved this novel. So There's that. Next is another book in the sort of vein of criticisms of religion, and I have it as a part of this, which is the Portable Nietzsche. So Friedrich Nietzsche, also obviously a philosopher from the 19th century who was very fiercely critical of religion. But the particular book in here that I think I might read is The Antichrist, which is his. It's a pretty short book, less than 100 pages, and it's his major book where he lays out his criticisms of Christianity. Hence, the title. So there's that one. The next one would be a reread for me. This is A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis, which is sort of kind of a memoir of the time after his wife died and how he dealt with that grief, and kind of it also deals with sort of that old question of theodicy. How could a good, benevolent, all-powerful God let evil things happen? And it deals with it in a very, very accessible way, from what I remember. It's not like a heavy work of theology. It's mostly just one man's personal reminiscences and thoughts on the subject. And he's a very intelligent man, obviously, so there's that. The first of these last two is Psychoanalysis and Religion by Erich Fromm, in which he kind of interprets the motivations behind the sort of psychoanalytic motivations behind religion as he sees it, which I think sounds really, really interesting. But psychoanalysis is not something I put that much stock in, but I do find it very interesting. So there's that one, and then finally we have Philosophy of Religion: The Historic Approaches by Charlesworth. I know he has a first name, but it's not printed on the cover. M.J. Charlesworth, which just goes over a lot of the basics of the philosophy of religion. It's very short, it just goes through like Plato, Thomas Aquinas, Augustine, all the major names. So there's that. So that's my maybe pile for Maybe Midrash, and also my guaranteed pile for Maybe Midrash. I would implore you all to have faith that I will read all of them, but we'll see. Anyway, so. Anyway, that's all. I would encourage you all to participate if you haven't considered this readathon, and I would love to hear any of your thoughts on any of these books if you have read them or want to read them. And thank you to Jason, Felicia, and Steve for putting this together. I think it's a great idea. So anyway, I will leave you all now, and I'll talk to you later. Bye, guys.